I had an African-American Old Testament professor in seminary who tried to convince the class one day that the use of the terms white and black as racial categories was racist. He pointed out that white implies righteousness, purity, light, while black implies sin, impurity, and darkness. Now, at the time, I dismissed what he had to say as just so much political correctness gone amok. But since then, I've come to reconsider what he had to say and have come to the conclusion that, indeed, white as a racial category is racist, but for reasons different than what he gave. As for the term black, I still don't see that as particularly racist. In fact, many African Americans see it as a way of taking back their own racial identity and view it as a source of pride. White, on the other hand, is much older and has a more universal meaning. One that I will argue in this video is fundamentally and irredeemably racist. In order to convince you of this, I first need you to answer a question for me. What is the opposite of white in a racial sense? Now, before you answer black, think again. We're not talking about the color wheel here. We're talking about what is the opposite of white, a white person. It is not a black person, it is a non-white or a person of color. Yes, black is a small category within that larger category of non-white persons. But the opposite of white is not just black, it's all those other categories that are not white or persons of color. Historically, the term white has been used to divide up humanity not among many different racial groups, but between just two racial groups. People of European descent, and more specifically, people of Northern European descent, and everybody else. But why divide up humanity in such a dualistic, simplistic way? I mean, clearly, humanity is made up of many, many different racial groups, not just two. What purpose does it serve to divide up humanity in this way? Well, in order to answer this question, we must ask and answer another question. What criteria does a given society use in dividing up scarce resources like wealth, power, status, and privilege? We tend to assume in first world democracies such as our own that such scarce resources are divided up according to the most deserving, in other words, merit. Who works the hardest, who is the most competent, trustworthy, and so forth. In other words, that we live in a meritocracy. And yes, merit is an important criteria in dividing up wealth, power, status, and privilege in first world democracies. But it'd be naive to assume that it's the only criteria, or even the most important criteria. For example, age is an important criteria in how these scarce resources are divided up in most first world democracies. For example, in the United States, you have to be of a certain age before you can drink or drive or vote. And even how wealth is distributed in the United States, age is an important consideration. The Social Security Administration takes wealth from younger working people and redistributes it to older retired people, simply because they are older. Now, age is far from the only criteria used in these first world democracies and most societies, now all societies, in dividing up scarce resources like wealth, power, status, and privilege. There's other criteria as well. I once attended a seminar sponsored by my church denomination in which the question was asked, what do most successful pastors have in common? And the answer was, they are tall men. And I knew that, of course, that gender played an important role in how wealth, power, status, and privilege is divided up. But I never thought that height was also a factor. There are all kinds of other criteria used in our society and others in determining how these scarce resources are distributed. For example, what religion you belong to, how attractive you are, what economic class do you belong to. And I have lived long enough and seen enough people that are pretty incompetent rise to high levels of success and wealth and status and power to have concluded that merit is sometimes not that important in determining that success. You probably know where I'm going with this. It is that just how white you are plays an important role in our society and in many others regarding how we distribute these scarce resources. And I mean white in a racial sense. But who exactly are white people? Well, it's important to understand that the term white is only superficially associated with skin color. In the antebellum South, and even after the Civil War for many years, you were not considered to be white if you had even one grandparent who was a person of color. And I don't care how white your skin color happened to be. It also is the case that in long stretches of our history as a country, many different groups, such as the Irish, Southern Europeans, Catholics, Jews, were not considered to be really white. Of course, the term white has also changed and I believe expanded in including more groups over the years. For example, many people of Asian descent are now considered by some to be, you might say, honorary whites. There's also disagreement regarding who is white and who isn't white. For example, in a recent survey of Hispanics, only 1 in 4 Hispanics considered themselves a person of color. The rest presumably assume that they are white. It is important to understand that the meaning of the word white as a racial category is a built-in systemic feature of our language and culture, how we think and how we speak. Well, without even thinking that we are doing so, we divide up the world between the privileged white and the not-so-privileged non-white when we use white as a racial category. We all know all kinds of ugly racial slurs. But as bad as these racial slurs are, at least they're easy to recognize and condemn. As for the term white, it is particularly insidious as a racist term because we do not recognize it as being racist, and so banish it about, not even realizing that we are perpetuating this view of humanity, dividing it up between the deserving white and the not-so-deserving non-white. So how should we refer to white people, particularly if it is a self-referential term? Well, we refer to blacks as African Americans and Indians as Native Americans. Why shouldn't we refer to people of European descent as European Americans? I mean, why would we refer to these other groups as African Americans or Native Americans and not refer to ourselves as European Americans? Is it because we have to remind ourselves that these other groups are also Americans, but we don't have to remind ourselves? Instead, we're just white, and so we're automatically Americans? Some of you may be becoming rather irritated and indignant by now, believing that I am being presumptuous, telling you what words you can use and cannot use. And I would be presumptuous if I were doing that, but I'm not doing that. What I'm doing is telling you what I believe the meaning of the word white is when used in a racial sense. It's totally up to you whether you use it or not. So what does it mean? Well, to use a biblical metaphor, it divides humanity between the good sheep and the bad goats. Now, you may well insist that that's not what you mean when you use the word white to refer to yourself or as a racial category. And I take you at your word. That might very well be the case. But you see, words are not private constructs. They are public constructs. Otherwise, we would not be able to understand each other when we spoke to each other. No matter what you personally mean by the word white, when used in a racial sense, when you use it, most other people who hear it interpreted it as dividing up humanity between the deserving whites and the not so deserving non-whites. But as I said before, it's totally up to you whether you choose to continue using it or not. I have no interest in controlling your speech or action. What I am interested in doing is encouraging you to claim your full moral freedom to make the choices you want to make, consistent with your morality, rather than just saying or doing things out of mindless habit. Far from wanting to control you, I want you to be as free as possible, making your choices based upon your own values and sense of morality, rather than just mindless habit. What I've been trying to tell you in this video is that every time we use white as a racial category, we are, however unintentionally, dividing up humanity between the deserving white and the not so deserving non-white. And we're perpetuating the use of that criteria in distributing such scarce resources of wealth, power, status, and privilege in our society and among its members, no matter how deserving or undeserving they might be. And if that ain't racist, I don't know what is. But again, I have no interest in controlling what you say or how you act. That is your right as a free person. And if you have no problem using white in that way, then so be it. Whether I've convinced you that white, when used as a racial term, is racist or not, I hope that at least I have made you think. Is white just a neutral term referring to people of European descent? Or is it a racist term used to divide up humanity between the deserving white and not so deserving non-white, and used as criteria in distributing scarce resources such as wealth, power, status, and privilege? If you like videos that make you think, then I would ask you to press the like button because according to the YouTube algorithm, that will make this video available to more people. Thank you, and may God bless.